welcome to all the participants to today's webinar, Successful Sales in Germany. My name is David Strauch, and I'm a representative of the IHK Düsseldorf. Today, as you can maybe see in the background, we already have a big startup event in Düsseldorf today. It's the Digital Demo Day, so I'm kind of hosting live from a big startup event. And yeah, I'm very excited today to have Mr. Alexander Nowrot here, who will share his insights into sales in Germany with us. So yeah, a very warm welcome to Mr. Nowrot. He's a very experienced professional and has held various leading positions abroad already, and he will share his experience in B2B selling with us today. And I'm sure Mr. Nowrot also has some things to say about himself, so I will kindly hand the word over to him now.
Yeah, thank you very much, David. I hope you can hear me loud and clear, and everyone?
Yes.
Brilliant. Okay. Yeah, welcome everyone. Warm welcome from my side. My name is Alexander Nowrot, but just call me Alex or Alexander, as you wish. Yeah, I'm the managing partner of the consulting firm Lebenswerk Consulting Group. Lebenswerk is German and stands for lifetime or life's work. Yeah, and in fact, our mission is to enable everyone in a company to retroactively consider their own contribution in our project as their own life's work. I specialize in shaping high-performance sales organizations, creating game-changing strategies, and especially enabling large organizations, but also mid-organizations, to have a higher return on innovation, yeah, in order to really thrive in future. So I'll give you some brief about myself a bit more in just a minute. Welcome to my speech, B2B Sales Success in Germany. I think it's now the third or fourth time we're doing that. I'm running through a couple of slides and a few insights in the next 30 to 40 minutes. And then I think the best would be that we have a Q&A. So save your questions for the end, because maybe some of your questions might be answered. And otherwise, David, of course, feel free to interrupt me. In fact, there is a content related question or so forth. Okay, let's dive right into it. Yeah, like I said, I want to start after my intro about some big sales myths and sales killers. Then focus on COVID and its effects on selling, because there's still a long COVID, so to say, knock-on effects on selling. Focus in generally on the sales process and what it actually takes to be successful when selling in Germany. Then focus on a couple of sales cycle and deal techniques, and then we end with a Q&A. First of all, you know, I would like to share a story with you. Okay, you're probably running already a company, or you're just about to run a company, and you can consider yourself looking at the following. Just imagining two lumberjacks in the forest. Okay, your task you have given to them is very simple. They each have to cut wood, and the goal is to have the highest pile of wood at the end of the evening. Now you make the following observations. Your first lumberjack you have been given the task is starting to chop the wood without interruption, really with a high passion, high energy, high vigor, and has a certain sizable wood at the end of the day. The second one every now and then makes breaks. And unsurprisingly, at the end of the day, the second lumberjack has delivered the higher, or like the much more higher number of woods at the end. Okay, so my question to you is, what's the secret? Think about that. What's the secret? And well, since it's now not like an open one here, I want to share the insight, and it might surprise you. Yes, he's done some breaks, but not to completely just recover and rest and do nothing, but to simply sharpen his axe. He has sharpened his axe in the break. Okay, and this is exactly what I would like to do with you today, to sharpen your axe with selling. You know, it's important that we take every now and then a minute to reflect on certain strategies. Now, myself, a couple of points here. I have a former background in the logistics industry. I have trained probably around about 500 sales and key account people, and have probably delivered 50 consulting projects. Yeah, I'm a guest lecturer with an executive MBA program, also an advisory board member at a university, and have worked abroad in South Africa and Australia. Also, I have now about just published a book, my first book in selling, which first started to be delivered in German, sales and business models in the logistics industry. but will later also be published in English in the beginning of next year. You can connect me with me on LinkedIn if you're interested, and I can also keep you in the loop as soon as the book is being published. Now, you know, when I always talk about new techniques and certain insights, I would like to draw on an example when you actually hit the golf ball for the first time. So let's just assume we're on a golf course, okay? If you are like me, you have no idea what to do really on the first time, okay? And when I hit the first time the golf racket, I had no idea. I thought, you know, I could hit the ball at some point pretty good. Went in an 18-hole golf course and I had no idea what I was doing. Yeah, it was a complete disaster. It was worse than torture. I was pretty frustrated. So I went to a coach. The first thing the coach did was to actually change my grip. So for those of you who have learned golf know that the grip on the racket is extremely important and it feels very unnatural at some point. So I would like to invite you to follow me as the coach, even if it means I'm suggesting maybe techniques which maybe feel a bit inconvenient. That's normal. It's supposed to be like that, yeah? But I encourage you to really, you know, do it, have a certain, discipline in that 2 or 3 weeks, and then you will see there will be different results, okay? So let's look at key account sales and sales in general. So overall, one can say, you know, the timely resources seemingly get less. However, your clients and your key clients specifically get more sophisticated. So the task input of sales staff can be very, you know, simply categorized in the following: revenue generating, revenue preventing, avoidable and unavoidable. Now, what are revenue generating tasks? Revenue generating tasks are those which you love to do. You go to a customer, maybe the first time, maybe the third time or the fourth time, you're closing, you are creating proposals and so forth. Okay, revenue preventing is very important to differentiate very sharply in unavoidable and avoidable. Avoidable is often if I spend too much time on the wrong clients, you know, when I'm time wasting, when I'm procrastinating, and when I have very strong lack of competency in selling. So, you know, this is especially important for your novice sales staff, that they actually you know, being trained properly and that they really focus on revenue generating tasks. Now, of course, there are revenue preventing tasks which you can't avoid. For instance, when you are a very small firm, sales maybe does other functions, yeah? And sometimes these other functions might be operational due to a lack of general resource, and you can't avoid those because they're very important. But it's very, very crucial to really think about and think through with your team what are actually your revenue generating tasks, and subsequently focusing your biggest you know, well, hours on those, and especially your productive hours on those. Especially this happens with no innovative products. It's so important that you really think about, it's not just that there isn't a category where decision makers have actually the money to spend on, but you have new people which pop up constantly. Yeah. So especially in Germany, Germans are rather risk averse. So that means you will find very rarely there's only one buyer and he gives you the check for 50,000 or 100,000 or whatever. Even for 10,000 euros, there might be 2 or 3 people. So it's important that you really take the time and think about, well, you know, what are actually my key people here? Who do I have to influence? And for that, you need to have hours you put in, yeah? The sales process then is often misunderstood because then the discussion is often around features. So I often experience the next big startup, you know, who have put a lot of time, and it's very fair, a lot of time on the technology, on the services and on the features and so forth. The problem is though, and I'll get to that more in a minute later, that the decision makers don't really care too much about features. They really care about value and what will be different as a result, okay? So here now a couple of the biggest sales myths and sales killers at the same time, okay? Number one, too much time spent on revenue preventing tasks. So this is, I think, quite obvious from what I've just said. Then you are neglecting sales. And I can tell you, you as the CEO, you as the founder, I don't care what background you have to become really proficient in understanding sales, because you are in a sales and marketing business. It means nothing if you can't generate transactional value for whatever you have invented, whatever have recreated, because you will be judged by your clients and also by your investors really on how much transactional value have you actually executed. And for that, you need to become proficient in selling and clock the times. So this is now also the point number 2. Yeah. Number 3, low airtime at clients, kind of is the opposite of the, well, or kind of similar to number 1, but it basically means it's the opposite of revenue generating tasks. You don't want to have enough time with your key clients. You have too many opportunities. You may be having a pipeline with 100 opportunities, or they're far too big or they're far too small. We also get back to that later a little bit. You want to have a diverse pipeline. Yeah. Then the wrong focus at key accounts. It might be that you have the wrong focus on the wrong decision makers. You're spending too much time with people who are very interested, but who can only say no to you. So they don't have any financial responsibility and just keep spending time with you, but they can't transport, of course, the message internally as much as you can. Yeah. Okay. There's a quick question here. I think the session will be recorded and also be shared later on to everyone. Now, a couple of other things, sales myths and sales killers. The quotation process takes too long. Today we live in an instant culture. You don't want to wait a day or actually a couple of days for your next airfare. Of course, you cannot expect as a customer to have an instant quote for a B2B deal. But often I find that the quotation process is far too long. Yeah, it should take maximum 24 hours, no matter how complex it is, maximum maybe 36 hours, maybe at some official tenders a bit later, but generally speaking, you have to be so focused that if a customer really is ready to make a deal with you, get the quotation quickly to them. Then you have a lack of relationship with economic buyers. That's what I meant a bit earlier. You're speaking too much with people who can only say no, but not yes to you. And then point number 8 is from the previous slide. You have a product and feature drunkenness. So you are having spent too little time on really shaping value, okay? Number 9 is not pushing back when appropriate. That's especially difficult for those of you who are rather, introvert or are very like harmonic driven. Yeah, sometimes you don't have to give a customer what they want or what they ask for, but rather what they need, even if it means you're going a bit different to what a customer really wants. Yeah, that takes, of course, a bit of experience, but I'm just letting you know. Watch out for those customers who want, and you're thinking actually it's not really what I think is the best case for them. Have a discussion and say something like, you know what, I understand where you're coming from, but how about, have you thought about into this and that direction? Number 10 is the wrong concept of money and time. If you just take one thing from today's call, just one thing, okay, it is that money and time is not a resource. I repeat that, money and time is not a resource. We also deepen that a bit more, but it's very, very important. If someone says, I don't have the time or the money to work with you or to talk to you, it simply means they haven't understood your value, because money and time is always available. It's just really a matter of priority. Yeah, sounds very logical if we think about it, but we too quickly think that these things are sometimes scarce. So let's now look at COVID-19 and how it has affected B2B selling. Okay, so the first one is the number of appointments will decrease for good. It's absolutely clear that people have definitely thought, okay, I can do far more with Teams. I cannot, I don't have to entertain everyone with a coffee and so forth. So the number of appointments will go down for good. Second one is the appointments will be a lot harder to secure, but they will be far more desirable. It might be a bit tougher to get the face-to-face appointment, but you will have a better discussion of issues with the customer. The third one is then that the recruiting of sales leaders and sales should be treated equally to hire a department leader. Don't hire someone next best because there wasn't anyone else better and you needed someone in sales. It's better if you keep that resource empty, because someone who isn't really qualified, who isn't really competent, can cause a lot of damage for you. Fourth one is that someone face-to-face in an office who costs you easily 40, 50 or 60,000 euros in Germany per year is very expensive. So should return minimum 2 to 3 times to what they cost. Yeah, that should be your expression, your expectation, and you should also measure someone appropriate like that. Availabilities are also changing. Now in Q3 could be that people are a bit more available because they say, before I go into shutdown, perhaps again in winter, but also you want to schedule appointments early here. Expectations also rise that you have to become a lot more a consultative salesperson. It's not just a product, it's really about what can you do to help them personally to push through their own agenda. Yeah. So always ask yourself, what is the personal agenda behind the corporate agenda? Yeah, that's the expectation also from key clients. And the contract durations, but that's maybe not important for every one of you. But what I find is that now there's an increasing period that people looking at new suppliers, why there is a recession around the corner. So people are really looking out for additional cost savings and are now prepared to make one or the other decision. Now let's look at what doesn't change. Yeah, we often speak about what changes, but we far too rarely ask us the question, what doesn't change? Number one is, it's still absolutely true that too little time with customer spend is a deal breaker. Yeah, whether this is virtually or face-to-face, the currency trust only develops with time spent with people. Number two is the quotation turnaround time as a booster for the sales process. Like I said before, I repeat it here, it's so important. Number three is the lack of a customer relation not to buy and wasting time in operational tasks. And it's often a lot more your own fault than what you think. I often hear, yeah, but I can't do anything else than that. I have to take care of that. But more often than not, we don't trust enough other people, or we have unresolved conflicts or unresolved root causes. And we say, well, before we clarify that, I'd rather do it myself. And again, I've wasted time in avoidable non-revenue generating tasks. And the focus on wrong customers. And also the sixth one is an important one here. If I don't measure my efficacy, yeah, if I don't measure my own efficacy, and so in other words, on how many customers do I need to be successful, what is my hit rate, how many do I need for the next deal, then it will be very, very difficult for me to excel and build really a structured and scalable sales process. So let's now look at what we have here in the sales cycle, yeah, for the first time. So what we see here is really it all starts with the first contact, right? And then we basically have the normal cycle: appointment face-to-face, a problem identification, concept discussion, and so forth, and a presentation on offer. And to simplify that, I've prepared you another slide to really keep it simple. Is this one. You basically have four parts: qualification, interviewing, presentation, and closing, okay? And of course, all starts with qualification. Like I said before, we're not going to go into too much detail because of the time today. But the most important part I want to stress here, guys, is not the closing part. Don't focus too much on closing. Don't get too desperate, but focus rather on the interviewing part, yeah? Think really about, if I don't create a trustful relationship, if I don't discover the need, and take the time to do that, I will be a lot more unsuccessful than if I do my homework here. Yeah, and that's also the main aim of this presentation, to really help you to focus on that. And also, later on, when you then have a presentation, when you have created a strong relationship with your economic buyers, then the closing part is really a lot more simple. And you can get to a stage where I can demonstrate with my customers, but also with myself, closing rate north of 60%, 60, but you have to do it properly before, yeah. So now let's look at some models, which will help you to actually execute sales a lot better from tomorrow on. The third one is, the first one is really the 1/3 rule. It's a brutal but very, very effective way to really measure yourself and also debunk your own ego. And I'll show you how you do it. Generally speaking, 1/3 of all customers in the green here on the top right, you win whatever you do. Yeah, you don't even have to be good at your job. You just seem to be lucky. Maybe someone likes your idea, likes your logo, says, hey, we need a new fresh startup or a new firm, or just likes the way you are. You just click on the first meeting, or in a second, you already have the deal. Easy. Unless you're utterly incompetent and you're sabotaging the deal, you get it, okay? The next 1/3 of all the companies you speak to, you have absolutely no chance. No matter how refined your process is, no matter how good you are, you just won't get it. And the reason for that is there might be roadblocks, a crazy payment cycle of the customer, crazy clauses in a contract, or simply that you have a procrastinator who is basically married to your competition, gives you false promises, and so forth. And the trick is to identify the last 1/3 where they maybe say no in the beginning, where it's very, very hard, but those you can still win. Those are the hard wins. And you always have to ask yourself, what part of my pipeline is hard wins and no chance wins? And sometimes the no chance wins, to acknowledge it is very, very difficult, because often salespeople have an ego, of course. Yeah, they have to have one, because they are often alone and they have to really rock and win in front of the customer. But often they fall to the trap to, oh, I have spent so much time, a whole year, to try and win this customer. Now let me get this right. Let me prove I can still win that customer. And sometimes you have to physically drag someone away from that. Yeah. So that's what I mean, like with the hard wins and the no chance. And sometimes it simply means when a decision maker moves on from a no chance, you go into a hard win. Okay. So that's a very, very important one. And you can ask yourself this today when you look at your own pipeline. And you will have a good gut feel about that. Yeah, there's no doubt about it. Now, further, you have to look at your own quota, as I mentioned before. We're going to look at that just now. And here's an excellent way to get started. You know, now you think, well, is this guy, is Alex now suggesting us stuff from the 80s or 90s? No, I'm not. I'm just telling you that combined with your email techniques and other ways, you have to get comfortable calling people. It's as simple as that. It's not illegal. In fact, it happens in a B2B context. It is not legal if you call in a B2C environment private customers, but you can, of course, call in a business-to-business context decision makers. And you have a 15 times higher chance to get through to a meeting and to a decision maker compared to email marketing. Yeah, that's proven by several researchers. And it also helps you to really become good at winning the appointment. And the simple fact here, what you can do is to really measure your number of calls, number of conversations, and number of new appointments. You will probably have an odd of 8-to-1 or 10-to-1. Means for every 8 calls, you get 1 appointment. So if you say, I want to have 1 new meeting every day, you have to make 8 to 10 different phone calls every day. Okay. If you are doing that and you're then getting 4 to 5 meetings every week, and you can just turn 10% of these customers, it basically means that you make a deal every 14 days, which means you have round about 24 new customers every year. Yeah. And that's how powerful this technique is. And we also get to those numbers in a minute again. But you just have to really work out your quota here. Now, you know, what is lean selling now in general? You know, if we now look at need a bit more, and I've mentioned in the interviewing part, we have to look at that. We have to really differentiate between existing need, anticipating need, and creating need. And existing need simply is, I give the customer what he or she wants. Yeah, maybe selling a phone, everyone needs a phone, but maybe an anticipating need is a phone which has a smart bar, like for instance, what Apple introduced in 2008, which was the reason they could anticipate a need, created a completely new need, a desire from a customer, and were able to reap so much market share from Nokia. Yeah, and you get to the anticipated need if you ask customers not just what they want, but rather understanding from very critical questions, what are their hidden desires? And then you build and optimize your products and services by that. Okay. How can we further pull and also create more need from customers and maybe hidden needs? What I do today, you can also do. You should really get very comfortable and just get started in creating and running webinars. Yeah, for instance, maybe with the IHK, locally with you, maybe with other trading platforms. They always are happy for new ideas, especially with technologies. And you can see that probably 1 in 10 in a webinar will probably try to follow you afterwards. Maybe 1 in 15. Yeah, connect with your LinkedIn. Some of you might connect with me after this webinar. So it's absolutely normal. And that's a fantastic tool. It's free often. And you can differentiate between people who are really just in listening in and maybe have a good time, and those who really have an immediate need with you and come to you. Yeah. Then, of course, it's extremely important that you ask existing customers for referrals, for recommendations. Anyone who likes to use you right now will have probably a couple of contacts who can benefit in the same way like you have. Okay. Then, of course, you have to also ask yourself, you know, is the customer value I'm currently getting in a logical relation to the process cost I'm creating? This is a bit more advanced, but it is especially true for those of you who have already an existing customer portfolio and who are basically thinking about, well, how can I further streamline my portfolio and focus really more on developing top customers and create maybe even game-changing products with them together. Yeah. So always ask yourself the question, you should do this minimum every 6 months, and a healthy churn rate, so a rate where customers go away, is probably 10 to 15% every year. Yeah, that's not a bad thing. It's important that your operations can breathe. Now, let's look a bit more about, in the last part of my presentation, about selling in Germany. So I talked about the decision maker matrix. In general, you can categorize the people you talk to in only 2 categories. Yeah, the ones who can say only no to you, but not yes. So those are people who might be very interested in you. Make no mistake, they spend time with you, they hear you out, but when it really comes down to a proposal, they probably say something like this: I have to take it now to my boss, or sorry, I can't make a decision, but send me something. And then you have the problem, you've created need with them and certainly an interest, but you haven't created a relationship yet to the economic buyer. And they are basically on the top. Yeah, and those are around about 2% of the people, especially with new products. They can say yes and no. And your goal has to be, number one, to establish very early, am I talking to a key recommender here, yeah, or with an economic buyer? And you do it simply by asking the question, if you and I had to shake hands, like David, if you and I had to shake hands today, would we be able to start tomorrow? Then David, if, you know, I've done my job so far, would probably tell me, if he likes me to get forward, Alex, yes, but you also have to involve James and Nick. Okay, I say fair enough. How about David, you and I meet together with James and Nick in order to make sure that whatever we are trying to propose here also meet their needs. Yes, Alex, let's have a meeting together next week. Fantastic. Yeah, that is so important, and it often is completely neglected. And I experience it very often, not just in small firms, but also in large firms, from experienced salespeople, that they send a proposal to a non-verified person and then wonder, why do I not hear anything, or why does it take so much time? Yeah, and that's a real game changer if you really ask yourself that question. And again, make no mistake, you can by all means have a first meeting with a key recommender, but your job has to be to get sufficient amount of trust that that person actually recommends you to the top economic buyer. Okay. And always, of course, try and aim to deal as early as possible with an economic buyer. Now, further, what is to know about selling in Germany? It's rather formal. Certainly, it's the use of the Mr. and Mrs., unless otherwise offered in the first-name culture. There might be a different for you, but it's just a normal thing in Germany. And it's rather conservative towards technology. Yeah, so trust building is very important. And you will often have the problem that people want the perfect solution. Yeah, people are very perfectionist here in Germany. And sometimes you have to help them to say, it's okay to not be perfect, but you know what, rather to raise the bar with a tool which is a lot better than what you had before, okay? You have often buying centers, and it's very hard to identify the budget holder. So you have to spend time with that. And don't be fooled by someone, yeah, we have a buying committee here. We have 3 or 4 people here. And I often hear also from experienced people, oh yeah, then we have identified who is making the call here. And I said, no, because the committee also reports to someone in the background, and you have to identify the background person. I'm not saying you can make a deal without a background person, but you're only increasing your odds if you involve the person from the start. And consider innovation-driven organizations as targets, okay? So rather really look at which of your target organizations have a very innovative smell to them. You can see it in the news. How often do they appear, maybe with new products, with new technologies? Do they maybe have an own accelerator and so forth internally? Yeah. And always do a follow-up, very, very important. Never ever leave a meeting without an agreed follow-up step. Yeah, very important. Germans also like that, to have a certain continuity in that. And you know what, even if you don't get the follow-up meeting, you know at least where you are at. Yeah, but that's also how you create a continuity in that. Now, if we now talk about client acquisition and focus in the video call, here's a couple of operational tips I want to give you, because I do recognize, of course, that not every time you can make a face-to-face meeting. Maybe there's a distance, or you have, a video call tool, and that's fine. What's important is the following. Yeah. Try and really have a very clear agenda and share it before. I know it's a basic, but often this is underrepresented. Make it short and crisp, because people usually tend to lose you after an hour and a half, or maybe even 75 minutes. And make it and break it up. Yeah. If it's a longer workshop, break it up really in 2 or 3 parts. And try and really have a headset and a proper camera. I don't have a headset today, but I have a professional camera with a professional speaking system here, which is why you probably hear me very loud and clear. Yeah. Then think about a proper background. Dress to impress. Yeah, the same rules apply. If it's a very formal organization, don't necessarily just appear with a t-shirt. Of course, you have to feel comfortable, but try and really match the person you talk to. And what's important here as well is make a follow-up meeting within 24 hours, or like a follow-up in terms of a written email, and try and establish really a next step. And it's important, don't type while taking notes. Yeah, there's nothing more annoying when you have like this constant noise of keypads, but take handwritten notes. Yeah, you will not be quick enough probably anyways to take notes. Do it for your internal meetings, but not with customers. It's very disturbing. And if it's the 3 or more of you, you are representing maybe together, or you have a meeting together. Those of you who don't talk, put yourself on mute. Yeah, that's also more professional and more clear. And what's important as well, keep the eye contact. Yeah, often what I see is people look into the screen because they see the other person's head there. But if they have an external camera, you have to look into the camera and not in the screen. So it's a bit, unintentionally, but you can also train that. I, of course, look, a lot on my screen because there's a lot of text I have to and content I have to convert to you. But if I look at you like right now, I look right now into your eyes because I look into the camera. Yeah, that also is something you can practice. Now, how does really trust development work? Okay, so what's important here is to ask yourself always, what is really the impact we are trying to generate here? And I can tell you one thing, what you actually say is the least important. What's a lot more important is how you come across, how your dynamic is, and how you actually talk, right? Because 93% happens non-verbal. 7% is content, 38% is the way, how I talk. So how loud I talk, if my voice, my speed is appropriate, if I'm too quick, too slow. And 55% is non-verbal. In other words, my gestures, my mimic, and so forth. Yeah, and therefore it is so important, of course, if you can, if it's virtual, to definitely put your camera on and to not overload the slides with too much content. And you see, hopefully in my slides, it's all very clear and to the point. Yeah. Again, here's a perfect example. I know Apple has often been quoted, but again, it's so brilliant. Have you ever seen an Apple advert with features or with content? You probably haven't. It purely goes on emotion. Okay. And that's also how your client will react. And that's why it's important to keep your presentation in that format. Yeah. The same happens also in Germany. That's already 30 years old, but was probably one of the pioneers, the Dr. Best toothbrush. Those of you who are linked in from Germany here, or you maybe who even have such a toothbrush before the electric one, know exactly, okay, I have a tomato representing like my gums, and I have a flexible toothbrush. Makes sense, I buy it. Yeah, without a single feature explained, it was a huge smash hit, and the product was copied. Yeah, so it doesn't have to be Apple. It can even start before, and you see how powerful images are. And that's why it's so important that you see, okay, makes sense, I like it. I like the way it's been handled, how it's been explained, how a strong emotion comes across, I buy it. Yeah, and you have to also apply this to your B2B products, this method. So let's now finish off with a couple of operational tips. The first one is, how do we shorten sales cycles? I often get, asked, well, what really are the do's and don'ts of really reducing sales cycles? Many small companies have 6, 9, or even 12 months of sales cycle time, a long time. So how do we further do that? Yeah, number one is you have to really focus on building trust. trust is a prerequisite before selling even begins. The more you take time in the beginning, the more you accelerate your sales cycle later. Yeah, that sounds counterintuitively, but it's so important. Don't go in with a presentation. Go in with a piece of paper and with a notepad. Buy a proper notepad. Yeah, ask provocative questions. Something like, if you're dealing with a non-decision maker, what would make you a hero? Tell me not about all your priorities, but about your top 2 to 3 priorities. If you only would be doing 3 things next year, what would these 2 or 3 things be next year? Yeah, those are powerful questions, and they help you to really understand early what this person thinks you are trying to convey here. Yeah. So generally speaking, you have to really think about, I take myself back. I don't do a product dump, but I rather really have a white paper maybe, and then I come up with a presentation which is based on really powerful statements I have been given from questions before. Yeah, follow the dynamics, and your main goal is identify the needs very early. Yeah, and like I said, verify if the person really is a decision maker. That does a great difference to shorten your sales cycle as well, because otherwise you're spending a lot of time getting the okays from other people, and then you wait for a long time for your proposal to be accepted otherwise. And the most powerful tip I can give you really is, and I have to drink something quick, secure the next appointment at the end of the first appointment. If you're doing that every time, it shortens the sales cycle by approximately 3 to 5 weeks. I can guarantee you that. Yeah, just because you are here together, you have the calendar, and now you can make the next meeting happen. Yeah. Now, how do we measure and improve the closing ratio effectively? That's my last point for today. That's what I mentioned early. Here are 3 parameters. Number 1, the number of proposals to verified economic buyers. Yeah, so don't just measure the number of proposals sent, and don't by all means say, oh, it's 50% automatically, but how many have really been sent to verified economic buyers? And if you've done that, that's a major difference. And then if you link the proposals to an already agreed follow-up date where you discuss the proposal, you're raising further your success rates with that, okay? And number 3 is the speed of offer and the quote turnaround time. Super critical, super important. Yeah, so how quickly do you get that to the decision maker? Now, what are common obstacles? Yeah, you get those. I'm not interested. I have no time. I have no budget, and so forth. We have seen that before, and it didn't work. Yeah, so all of that in a nutshell as well, because like I said, we have more time in the Q&A, but you will hear this very early, probably also over the phone, yeah, or in a meeting, on a conference, whatever. And what you say is simply this, okay? I absolutely hear where you're coming from. Actually, I'm glad you're saying that, because those were the same words, the exact same words, I'm not interested, from our biggest customer before they had a chance to actually understand what we are really doing different. So let me suggest to you, we have a non-binding open meeting where I explain to you how we have helped them. Does next week, Tuesday or Thursday, work for you? And you turn it around. Yeah, that is the powerful reframing technique. One more time, I'm saying, I understand where you're coming from, word for word. By the way, those were the same reaction from one of our biggest customers. And you put them in the same frame, and then you turn it around. Okay. So here's one way, and I'm more than happy now to answer some more questions of you may have, and I hope this was already an in-depth overview of some techniques here. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Alex, for this very insightful presentation. I'm happy to have witnessed it myself. And we have some questions in the chat as well. So one question in the chat is, I'm not a native from Germany, as well as I'm learning the German language. Yeah. Can you give emphasis on the language barriers? It's probably in this part where you go into the interview, I would imagine.
So what you're saying is basically if it's an issue to sell in English in Germany, or what is the question about, or if you're not really proficient in German?
The emphasis is on language barriers. So
yeah, okay.
I would imagine if you cannot Yeah, so the question was, yes, I'm proficient in English, so it's
Yeah.
probably if you are not proficient perfectly in German.
Yeah, so that's really not the main problem. I mean, of course, it is always a good idea if you contract a local sales. If you want to be successful in Germany, try and really hire a German native. Yeah, is the short answer for that. But secondly, I've made the experience that if you have a very, very good product, it's not the main problem that you can't speak German. It just is important that you speak with an economic decision maker, and they 90% of the time will be very, very much okay in speaking English with you. Yeah.
I understand. Okay, I hope this answers the question. Then we have another question in the chat. A user says, it sounds exactly like when you have to sell to Danish companies. What should you pay special attention to when selling to German companies versus, for example, Danish companies? Alex, I'm not sure if you are familiar with Danish companies, but
yeah,
maybe what is a special focus you should have when you are dealing with German companies in this case?
Well, I worked for a Danish company for Maersk Line, yeah,
Mhm.
in fact, for a couple of years of my career there. And I can tell you, that shows me a lack of experience because there's no difference. Yeah. What might be different might be reactions from non-decision makers, but decision makers in the world act all the same. They make the decision based on not only on the cost, but they have to understand what is in it for them. Yeah. So I make a decision based on not just on cost, but rather on the value I'm generating. And that's how every executives in the whole world tick. I've sold in South Africa, in Australia, also in the United States. And especially now with my firm where I'm 7 months and 6 years, I can tell you it doesn't matter if you're from Denmark, from Germany, or even from Spain, or from anywhere else. If you are a decision maker, you're having the same pattern, like I've explained before.
I understand. Okay, so maybe in this case, we have to get rid a bit of this intercultural thingy because some things are just rational link.
Exactly.
It's
That's
not
it.
down to.
Yeah.
All right. We have more questions in chat, unsurprisingly. Right. So let's read another one. Thanks a lot. Just one question. When do you do the first approach to a customer? How do you manage the 80% listening and 20% talking? Thanks again. So this was a question from Fernando.
Yeah, well, very simply, Fernando, by just asking enough questions and getting the person to talk and keeping my intro very, very brief. Yeah, and then just really asking questions and preparing some questions I want to ask and asking questions. Simple as that.
All right. Yeah, sounds logical. Like getting people to talk is always a good thing. We have another question in chat, but I'm not sure if I can't understand it right. Berang Bitaraf, maybe you can rephrase that, then I will happily ask this question, but I'm not sure if we can answer this right now. I have a question actually. In the interview part, you said trustful relationship is like the key point that you have to focus on. Do you have some best practice advices, like how to get your partner comfortable, how to show them that you are trustworthy, that you are well prepared in a sense?
Yeah. I mean, look, obviously a couple of things. Keep eye contact. Yeah, know your manners. So, I mean, sit down when only be seated, and really ask, questions and really be a proper listener. Yeah, and I mean, listening is a lot more harder than what we think because we have to really focus on the person and try and paraphrase. Did I understand it correctly, David, that your biggest issues are number one, number two? Yes, they are, Alexander. Thank you. Like you really understand what I'm talking about. Yeah. And also, how do we actually recognize trust? It's when the person on the other side gives us undivided attention. For instance, I'm not being distracted by my phone. I don't look my emails. I don't take calls. I don't get interrupted. And maybe I'm asked to stay a bit longer. Yeah. And maybe also the client is very happily to say, look, David, how about we get together again in 2 weeks? I'd love to come up with a concept based on what I've heard from you. If you like me, if you trust me, you of course won't say no to that. But if you don't like me, if you think I'm not trustworthy, say, Alex, yeah, I'm not sure, let's check again in 2 weeks or so. But if you think I was like the best salesperson you've met in the last 2 years, you most likely will want to meet me again, right?
True. Yeah.
There
Definitely.
we go. Yeah. So again, it's a matter of priority. Yeah. How important was this? How game-changing was this experience here with me? And how much have you impressed me? And then money and time is not an issue. I promise you that. Yeah.
All right. I understand.
Cool.
Okay. So we have one question that has been rephrased. Are these selling rules for all kinds and goods of services?
Yes, they are.
I would also say so. Yeah, definitely. Then we have another question. Any advice to new businesses with young international founders entering the German market with no experience?
Question is, a new experience in what? You know, if you have no experience, say, in selling, then I would really recommend you to read a couple of books. I mean, there are a couple of good books around. You know, you can read my book, of course, which I can maybe share a link with David at some point. But at the end of the day, you know, don't take, oh, I have no experience as an excuse. Just start and, you know, knock on doors. You know, that's how I started my career 12, 13 years ago. I basically read a couple of books, yeah. But then also more importantly, always ask myself, what can I do different? What can I learn from the previous fail? And here's a fantastic quote, and I want you to really inhale that. You will fail your way to success. Yeah, I repeat it, you will fail your way to success. You have to know that you are like a boxer. You have to understand that you get a punch every now and then. You will be knocked down, yeah, no matter how well you prepared are. But the point is to not take that too personal, but to really keep on moving. Yeah, that's what I would recommend.
Understand. Sounds logical. And also I kind of can make some kind of self-advertisement for this point. You can also always talk to the chambers of commerce in Germany. They will be happy to help you out also for your first steps. We are trained to help all kinds of businesses. So if you have questions regarding German law regulations, we will be happy to help you as well. All right. Now let me see if we have some more questions.
Some more question now.
So we have, for example, I represent a Polish IT startup. Would you recommend approaching customers directly or through German partners?
Well, you know, I can probably say try it on your own, you know, but it's important that you are proficient in English. Yeah. So, I mean, there's of course a language barrier there because, of course, if you're on your own, you will be able to better sell your own products. Yeah. There may be a partner of you. Then later, once you've scaled, then it might be a good idea to find partners locally.
Makes sense. Then let's see if, yeah, we have another one. What to do if you have no access possibility to get in contact direct to economic buyer? How to give the best arguments in a presentation to reach the decision maker?
Okay, I have a couple of problems already, like with the question, because I mean, guys, it's never been so easy to find out something about companies. Okay, just make a search. For instance, if it's the head of IT at Siemens, yeah, you probably get 50 different people. Why on LinkedIn? So anyone here who isn't on LinkedIn has done a major sin. You have to be on LinkedIn because you will probably find in Germany 80 to 90% of people in the right positions there. Yeah, so you will find people already on LinkedIn. And very often you can't just call like in the old days at reception, say, can I please speak to the head of IT? If you don't know the name, they won't put you through. But you can find these people on the social and especially professional media. Yeah, so you will always have an entry point. You just have to find that. I also recommend you not to buy any of these lead lists. They are expensive, they are silly, and they're just been sold to 1,000 of people. And then the problem is that the poor person that gets for the 900th time the same call. Yeah. The second one is don't attempt to prepare a presentation, email that to try and get a meeting. That won't work. Yeah. But rather try and really call the customers directly and really try to convince them to have a face-to-face meeting. And you may maybe speak to the head of IT. That might not be the right person to talk to, but you have at least started. Yeah, okay. And you might have then a contact internally.
Yeah, I would also say it's my experience. This kind of behavior won't work, and especially the lead list sounds like a terrible idea.
Yeah.
So I think we have one last question in the chat. Oh no, actually there's more. Let's see if we can manage all of them.
Good.
If your target group often are small companies, does it change with the decision makers?
Don't quite understand the question. What is changing with the decision maker? Maybe you can repeat or maybe elaborate.
Yeah. So Winnie, please, maybe you can elaborate on what you mean. Then we have a question from Dariusz. If you are an early stage startup and are going to market, would you rather hire a head of sales or a junior salesperson, plus hire a third-party agency that generates leads?
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, I often get asked it. I'd probably recommend to rather hire a more experienced person because there is simply no groundwork. Yeah, there's no one else to lean towards. And if you hire a junior sales, that person very quickly can get overwhelmed, yeah, and might get frustrated. So it makes more sense to make a bigger investment in the beginning, and then later on maybe make this like with a junior sales. And again, you know, a partner is of course very simple, you know, or maybe might be very you know, something like to start with, but you always have a better efficacy if you speak directly with someone who you hire yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds logical.
Yeah.
So Winnie still hasn't rephrased her question, so maybe I have another one. You talked about the biggest sales killers in the beginning, and you talked about diverse pipelines and the opportunities that you have or maybe not have. How can you find like the right balance to kind of manage your pipeline, that you are not overestimating or underestimating yourself constantly?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, look, I mean, three things. Number one is really come up with your own defined A, B, C, and D type customers. Yeah, on your own terms. Like, don't copycat this somewhere else, but say, look, this would be my dream customer. This is an A customer. This is B type customer, C and D, and have a healthy mix between A, B, C, and D. You know, try not have more than 30 to 40% with A type customers, but focus really 70 to 80%, or actually 70% between B and D type customers. Yeah, that's a healthy mix.
Okay.
Don't have everything just into two small customers, because they will really ruin your productivity, so that you have really like a good heart on the B and C type customers.
All right.
This is number one. Number two is always ask yourself, even if I have a small customer on D type, think about, well, how can I measure how much more potential they have? And you will probably find that even if maybe, let's assume you have a Siemens, but they only do 5,000 euros, of course, it can be an A type customers. So put in a relation, yeah, with that. And number three is really just get started, yeah, and you will know in yourself when you apply the 1/3 rule, hey, I've been hung up too much on my A customers just because I love to sign BMW. Maybe the client can't do it, yeah, and maybe I'm just get too hung up on my own ego. And there's something why the 1/3 rule I explained earlier is very powerful.
All right, yeah, thank you for explaining it. That makes a lot of sense to me.
That.
So in this time, Winnie managed to rephrase the question. So let's look at that as the last question for today, I would say.
Yeah.
Do it change when it comes to talking to the decision makers if you don't reach the right person in the first try? Does it change when it comes to talking to the decision maker if you don't reach the right person in the first try? Yeah, that's the question. So
if I understand correctly, yeah. So look, I mean, as I said earlier, don't worry too much if on the first meeting there's a decision maker. You know, that's not important. The important thing is that you actually get that meeting. And even if you speak to, let's now assume like the, you know, like the assistant bookkeeping clerk, yeah, even that person will probably know who you have to speak further on to later on, you know, to really get you going. So that's not too important, but the important is that you understand who else has to be involved to make a deal going. So never say, well, can I speak to your boss the next time? Because no one likes to hear that, yeah? Or even worse, well, are you the guy to speak to? And if someone has an ego, say, yeah, of course, there's no one else to see. And suddenly you're on a cul-de-sac. But rather really try and get recommended internally. So that's a nice thing, you know, if you get enough trust, the person will want you to meet your colleagues because they will want you to be successful, because you were the one as the key recommender to actually insert David, who has such an amazing software tool to really make travel requests a lot easier. Yeah, so you will be the hero internally.
All right. Yeah. I would like to be that.
Exactly. Who won't like to be that, right?
Yeah.
And then of course, David conversely will say, yeah, then maybe Alexander can meet maybe like the president of the Chamber of Commerce. So yes, by all means, like you should meet maybe Mr. Müller, and then there it goes. We have a joint meeting together, and fantastic. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that's a reasonable case that might as well happen in reality. So. All right.
Great. Good.
So we are coming to an end now. Before we leave and go, I would like to remind everyone next week on Tuesday and on Thursday, we also have a pre-program of the Startup Germany tour. On Tuesday, we will talk about the legal framework here in Germany. And on Thursday, we will talk about the German Chambers of Commerce here in Germany, which, as I already mentioned, is a powerful tool to get into the German market, since we have access to more than 1 million companies here in Germany. So by all means, check these webinars out. To Alex, thank you very much for today's presentation. And to all the listeners, yeah, I wish you all success in your business activities, and I hope to see you all soon in the other webinars. Bye-bye, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for your great questions and for your support.